Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Music, Money, and Life podcast. This podcast is brought to you by howtolicenseyourmusic.com. If you'd like to learn how to make money licensing your music in TV shows, films, video games, commercials, ads, and so on, visit howtolicenseyourmusic.com today. If you go there right now, you can get a totally free 202-page ebook called An Insider's Guide to Music Licensing, which is all about how to make money licensing your music in TV shows, films, and ads. Again, it's totally free, no strings attached. Visit howtolicenseyourmusic.com for more information. Okay, I have another great podcast for you guys. Today I'm speaking with Michael Nieves, who is the founder and CEO of a company called Sugaroo Music. And Sugaroo has been around since 1999. They're a really interesting company, and one of the interesting things about Sugaroo is that they work with a lot of really big name acts. They work with bands and artists like Wilco, Kate Bush, Mason Jennings, Billy Bragg, Michael Franti and Spearhead, The Offspring, Tom Tom Club, Ani DeFranco, and many, many more artists that I'm sure you're familiar with. It was a great conversation, another great podcast. One of the things that I liked about this podcast in particular is that Michael doesn't sugarcoat anything. He really tells you like it is, and he offers a very interesting perspective on what it takes to succeed in music licensing in 2017 and beyond. So without further ado, let's get into today's podcast. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Music, Money, and Life podcast. Today, I'm really excited to be speaking with the founder of Sugaroo, Michael. Tell me if I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Is it Michael Nieves?
It's Michael Nieves.
Nieves. I knew I was going to screw that up. Michael Nieves, who is the founder of Sugaroo, which is a music licensing, marketing, and management company. And thanks so much for doing this, Michael.
My pleasure.
So the first thing I wanted to sort of just dive into is I'm looking at your roster of artists, and it's huge. You work with a lot of really big name acts. It looks like a lot of indie acts as well. But looks like you represent artists like Wilco, Kate Bush, Mason Jennings, Billy Bragg, Michael Franti and Spearhead, The Offspring, a lot of bands and artists for licensing. How does it work, Michael? Are you representing their record labels, or do you work with the artists directly?
Yeah, I mean, for most of the artists that you just name-checked, they come from Epitaph and Anti, who we have been representing, for, I guess, about 9 or 10 years now. So the overwhelming majority of our collective roster are from the record labels or music publishing companies that we represent. There's not, I'd say probably like 3% of our catalog are people that are signed directly to us, not through another entity. So the overwhelming majority are from the labels and publishers that we look after.
And interesting, the 3% of artists that you do work with independently, how does that work? Do they come to you? Do you go to them? How do you connect with each other?
In all honesty, probably over the last 7 or 8 years, almost all of it is them coming to us. We have a pretty sizable roster, and we've really sought to curate a roster over the years that has, a really good, diverse collection of licensable music. So whether most of it's contemporary, though, some of it are older catalogs or some records from the past. So generally speaking, we're not, specifically ever really on the hunt for stuff. We probably get, somewhere between 10 and 20 solicitations, every week. Some of those are directly from artists, some from managers, some from labels. some from publishers, and we turn the bulk of those down because, we really want to be able to meaningfully work the artists that are already on our roster.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if I was an indie artist and I looked at the artist you represent already, I would be pretty intimidated. How important is it that the artists that come to you, that you choose to represent, like what are you looking for? Are you looking for a pretty established artist, or is it solely based on the music, or a little bit of both?
Well, I mean, it's primarily based on the music, but we really come at it from, a three-pronged criteria, with the understanding that anything that we're going to take on has to be what we consider to be licensable. So, there could be music that we may love personally, but if we don't really see a pathway to success for licensing it doesn't make sense for us. So that said, kind of the three categories that we look at are either, someone is a name artist who's got recognition, where, people will know them and they have licensable music. Someone is coming to us who also has licensable music, but we feel like it's, kind of a style of music that we don't really represent already, or we don't have much of.
Yeah.
So for instance, we're always looking for really good, sample-free, commercial-sounding hip-hop. So if someone came to us with that would be interesting to us. And then the third category, and this is very subjective, is just someone comes to us with something that we just think is so undeniably great, and we can really see so many opportunities to license it, that we would feel like idiots if we didn't take them on. So those are, broadly spoken, our three categories of kinds of music or artists we'd be looking for, when someone comes to us that we would potentially sign.
And interesting. And in terms of music that has that sort of X factor that you speak of, I know it's subjective, like you said, and it's probably hard to sort of define, but can you talk a little bit about maybe some of the characteristics? Like, what is it about songs and artists that grab you? Is it all over the map, or is there anything you can kind of point to for artists that are listening to this?
No, it really is all over the map, and that, sounds like a cop-out, but it's not, because there's just such a broad range of music that, the people that we pitch music to, are looking for. Now, there are certain things that end up getting, cyclical, so every now and then there's a really hot artist or a hot style of music that suddenly everybody wants, and, a number of years ago it was, Florence and the Machines, and, and then we went through a period of time where it was like Black Keys, and so, people were, anytime someone came to us with music, that was somewhat reminiscent of those, with strong songs that we thought were licensable, like, oh, that kind of piqued our interest. But, generally, the music that we may be looking for that we think has opportunities in episodic television could be pretty different than the music that we think has opportunities for it in advertising or theatrical trailers. So, there are certain kinds of songs and certain kinds of artists whose music gets used pretty universally, across the spectrum of the different, visual medias. But generally, when we're hearing something and we're considering it, it's like, oh, we could really hear this, particular artist songs, could be in a variety of different TV shows, or wow, this really, we could really pitch to the trailer house world. So, so it's really not about a style of music per se, as much as, the songs and how they resonate, and do we think we can find homes for them.
Interesting. And do you think that the artists that are writing music that tends to work well for these different contexts, whether it's television or advertising, do you feel like they're trying to write for those mediums, or do you feel like they just happen to write songs that align themselves with these different outlets?
Well, that's a good question. I think most artists, when they're sitting down to, write songs or to write their next record, are just trying to create something that they find, artistically satisfying.
Yeah.
There are some of our artists, who we're particularly close with, who, will sometimes send us and say, hey, I'm working on this, and, just want to know what you think. And so when we give, artists feedback like that, the caveat we say initially is like, listen, our comments are not going to be what we think is the right thing artistically. Our comments are what we think, can make it the most licensable from a sync perspective. Which is a different kind of commentary. And then similarly, we have people that, really, they're in the studio and they're writing songs and they're like, hey, I also want them, just write, I know you've said to me, you need songs that sound more like X, Y, or Z, or that are about the following topic. So, separate from the songs from my record, I've made I wrote and recorded a couple others that I think you might find homes for licensing-wise. And so it's really kind of all over the map. I mean, I think most artists are creating music just to create something artistically satisfying, and they want to, make the best record they can make, while others will occasionally, just try to create some songs that they think we can license.
Yeah, that makes sense. It sounds like it's sort of a combination of both. I mean, I would imagine if your only focus is trying to write songs that you think would work in the background of a television show or in the context of an ad, that would sort of suck the creativity out of the creative process. Yeah,
I mean, look, when I've spoken, moderated or been on different sync licensing panels and different kinds of, music conferences, over the years, both domestically and internationally. And, people are always asking, are my songs licensable or what? And again, I mean, I'm like, hey, go and get lists of songs that are getting used in TV shows, or go, don't scroll through commercials, watch commercials that have songs in them and listen to them. You'll get a sense of, the kind of songs that get used in TV shows. You get a sense of, songs that get used in commercials. Or when you go to the movies and you're watching the trailers before the film starts, pay attention to the songs that are used there, because there are songs that are, used in trailers. And, and I think most people don't realize that most of the music that's used in trailers are not also used in the film. I mean, that's a totally separate function, and it's a totally separate department that uses music for trailers. So, yeah, it's always, if that's something that someone wants to consider, then there's lots of opportunity to go and listen to music that's getting used and get a sense of the vibe or the lyrical content or what have you.
Yeah, absolutely. So shifting gears, sort of like what I'm trying to do with my podcast and my website and really everything that I'm doing in general is I'm really trying to provide artists with sort of a map, a formula, to the extent that's even possible, to get started in licensing and ultimately to be successful as musicians in general. So I know this is sort of a big, broad question, but how should artists, like beyond and apart from just making great licensable music, how should they be connecting with people like you?
Well, I mean, first off, depending on the kind of music an artist is making, and they think that they want to try to get their songs licensed, and they are not already signed to a record label or a publishing company, most of whom either have internal departments that do this work or hire companies, like mine, they should research the companies that are representing independent artists for licensing, and they should get a sense of, the kind of music that those people represent. I mean, we tend to be more generalists because we have such a diverse roster. But there are people that really function for the most part in urban music and the licensing side, or function for the most part in indie rock, or singer-songwriters. And so look, I mean, a lot of young artists are just reaching out to everybody.
Yeah.
But generally, if you reach out, the emails that I get from someone that I could see that they've, spent 10 minutes looking at what we do and getting a sense of who we are, those definitely resonate more than the ones that feel like they are, it's just a form letter that they created that they've sent out to tons of people. I mean, I get lots of emails from artists saying, hey, I want to see if you'll consider my songs, for the production you're working on, because they're assuming I'm a music supervisor, which means they haven't even done the minimum amount of work, So those I never pay attention to. I mean, emails I get that have MP3s attached very seldom get paid attention to. There's just too many easy ways to send people links from which they can stream their music to be clogging up people's emails with a bunch of MP3s. But I mean, look, there's a lot of companies that do this kind of work, and by this kind of work, I mean represent independent labels and artists, for licensing purposes. But there are companies that have been around for a while and clearly have a track record, and there's companies that are a little bit more fly by night. And so they should really just try to get a sense of about, researching it. There's different publications, and look, I mean, young people are all online all the time anyway. Just, get online and kick around and see what you can find.
What percentage of of the emails that you receive on a regular basis? Like what percentage would you say have actually done the research and obviously know what you're about and what Sugaroo is about, as opposed to people just randomly, blindly submitting their music to you?
Less than 5%.
Wow. Less than 5% that take the time.
Yeah, and that's why those are like, okay, like when someone writes a thoughtful note that, again, it's just not a form letter, it resonates more than when all they did was change the email address and the name. And look, I mean, I get why, someone wants to, cover a wide space and hit as many people as possible. But I mean, the emails that, someone has done, a minimum amount of research just, mean more than the ones that don't.
Yeah, I have to be honest. I'm having sort of a light bulb moment because I have to be entirely honest with my listeners and admit that I've done exactly what you're describing. I've taken emails and copy and pasted them, thinking that my credits and my background would be enough to sort of get someone's attention. But no, this is good stuff. This is giving me some ideas.
Oh, cool. That's great. I mean, look, there are times when, like we've had, music supervisors or production companies or studios or ad agencies that we've been working with, forever. We've got long-standing relationships. But at the same time, there are companies that pop up. There are music houses that pop up. People that were music supervisors for an ad agency and now they're out on their own. And maybe we don't know them. And so, anytime myself or anyone on my team, if we're reaching out to a company that we haven't already done business with, or with an individual that we haven't done business with, we ourselves are going to do some research first, and so
sure.
The note that we're writing makes them feel like, hey, we know who they are, we know some of what they've done, and that's why we're reaching out to them. When we're on the other side of the, of the email, we're trying to do the same thing that I'm suggesting people do when they reach out to companies like mine.
No, that makes a lot of sense. What are your thoughts on networking and connecting with people in person versus online? So I'm going to go out to LA next month. I'm going to be there for like 2 weeks, and I'm setting up meetings, and I'm going to be out there and trying to do as much face-to-face networking as possible. How much more effective and important do you feel like that is, as opposed to just sending people emails?
Well, I mean, I'm sure some of this comes because I'm a middle-aged dude, but everyone spends so much of their time online. And I cannot stress enough what I consider to be the importance of physically being in front of another human being. No matter what, at the end of the day, human beings are animals, and we communicate things, yes, verbally and with our intellect, but we communicate things with our body language and with our eyes. And there's, and if you're an intuitive person, there are things that you're going to pick up by sitting across a desk from somebody that you're never going to pick up, on email, certainly, and maybe not even on the phone. So, with my team, my creative team, they all have their, Sugaroo credit cards, and they're all, told to go out there and schmooze, pitch all the people that you pitch, but, get in front of people, meet up with people, have lunches, have coffee, have dinners, we invite people to our band's gigs, we know that these people get invited to probably 100 gigs a week, and so we don't take it personally if they don't say yes to the gigs we invite them to. But just the more time that you in front of another person, I think that just makes more of a difference than strictly electronic communication, which, it still forms the bulk of our communications. But there's nothing like being in front of a person, in my view.
Do you feel, or how important do you think it is to live in a major music city, a city like LA or New York or Nashville? Do you feel like you need to in 2017 to make it in the music business, music licensing, and just the music business in general?
I don't think you need to live in these cities, but I do think you need to visit these cities with some regularity. If you're, and I realize that could be a daunting thing if you are, a young artist who lives in Georgia, or Florida or whatever, anywhere that's not New York, LA, Nashville, and, maybe Austin, though there's really not that much music business industry in Austin. In terms of trying to meet people to work with your music, if someone is not on a label and they're not on a publisher, so they don't already have, industry relationships by virtue of the people that they're signed to, then yeah, they need to figure out how they can get in front of other human beings, and play shows in New York, Nashville, L.A., and just try to build a network of people. Now, look, ideally, if they don't have a label or publisher, they will, get a manager who's got industry contacts, or, failing that, have a lawyer, that has industry contacts, because it's a really hard thing to start from scratch, unless you happen to be an unbelievably, ridiculously great artist whose music is just popping up because it's popping up, and that is an incredibly small percentage of people that are making music, and it's something that no one should ever try to rely on.
So do you feel like even like prior to reaching out to somebody like you or a company like yours, that it makes sense to have a manager first, or an attorney or someone representing them? Or can indie artists that are just representing themselves connect with people like you and successfully start to get a foot in the door that way?
Well, they certainly can. It's always easier, like if someone is reaching out to me that I already know or I know of, they're just naturally, and I think I'm not just speaking for myself, I'm probably speaking, for most, if you're being reached out to by someone you've done business with before, then you're probably going to be more responsive to it. And look, if I was starting a business now, as opposed to having mine for 18 years, I was starting a roster now, then I would be looking at everyone that's emailing me, But it's just the reality of just the size of my roster, and and what our responsibilities are to the people we already represent, that lessens our interest in signing people. But there are companies that are looking to sign people pretty regularly. And at the same time, I would also suggest to your listeners that they be careful, because there's a lot of unscrupulous people out there, and who are going to try to take advantage of artists who, aren't experienced and don't necessarily know how things work. So.
Interesting. And what sort of things should people look out for to take advantage in what way?
Well, there's some general industry standards in terms of what, and I'm making a differentiation between a licensing company versus a music publishing company. If you're signing a music publishing deal, the nature of that deal is going to be different than if you were signing a deal to have someone, be your sync licensing entity. For the most part, if someone is not, giving you an advance, on future earnings, they shouldn't ever be asking for any ownership interest in your music, whether it's your master recordings or your music publishing rights. What you do see with some of the companies that have sprung over the years, they try to sign artists, they then take their songs and they retitle them, and in order to give themselves a piece of the artist's publishing, which has been done a ton of times, and it's repulsive and it's not cool, and people are doing it, probably 20 times right now somewhere in LA as we're speaking. So, there's just, and something that a young artist who doesn't necessarily understand how the business works is going to be more susceptible to those kinds of people than they would be if they had someone representing them that, understands the business.
Yeah, I was approached, I think this was last year, but I was approached by a publisher that wanted exclusivity, publishing rights, and they wanted to own the copyright for nothing up front. And I see it a lot. It just seems like a horrible arrangement.
It is a horrible arrangement.
Yeah.
And again, there's a lot of people out there doing that kind of stuff, and it's really not cool. So,
Yeah, so don't do that if you're listening to this.
Yeah.
Where do you, moving along, where do you see licensing in sort of the grand scheme of things in terms of revenue for artists? What should artists strive for licensing-wise? Like, what percentage of their income should be derived from licensing?
Well, that's almost an impossibility, to ever sort of project, because, everybody's, financial requirements are going to be different, So for the most part, I think most artists, if they are artists who are trying to, have a sustainable career for themselves, licensing is going to be part of it. Ideally, if they are creating music that is licensable. Look, there's some people that are making like really hard or aggressive music, and there's just not a lot of opportunities to license that, as an example. However, I think their primary focus should be on creating the best records possible and building a fan base, because what's really sustainable, in my view, for an artist long term is having a fan base, people that want to come see them play, people that want to stream their music, So, having opportunities to have, 30, 40, or 50 markets in the United States where they can play live shows and have people pay money to see them is a lot more sustainable than just trying to, get by on licensing income, which is so subjective and so impossible to project. You and I and 8 other people could be sitting in a room together and have someone put, a commercial on the wall and say, what kind of music you think should go behind this spot, and all 10 of us can say something totally different. So, I think, having a plan to have someone represent your music and try to get licensing, is smart, but I don't think it's anything that anyone can rely on and sort of, budget accordingly, because you just never know.
In terms of building a following and building a fan base for your music, and I realize this might be sort of a difficult question to answer, but it seems like the thing that everyone that I interview sort of points to is this idea of having a team, having, like you said, having a manager, having someone represent your sync licensing. If you sort of had to map out what an ideal network should look like in terms of people that you're working with, like how many people do you think should be on your team as an independent artist?
Well, I don't know if it's the number of people as much as it is the right people,
Yeah.
and look, and I think if someone has an opportunity to have a manager who maybe has some industry experience but not is but isn't a power player, but is just ready to give their blood, sweat, and tears to it, versus maybe having someone that's more experienced who's, not that into it, but is going to take you on as a favor or something. I mean, that's, those are always, hard questions that someone has to kind of figure out on a case-by-case basis. There's nothing like having someone who just believes in you completely and at the same time has some relationships, is smart, and is willing to bust their ass, because, manager is probably not going to make any money representing a young artist for some time, so there's going to be a not insignificant investment, look, if you end up having a manager who is, smart and well-connected and passionate, I mean, that's hitting a home run, because then you're getting all of that. So I don't know if it really matters the amount of people as much as who the people are. I mean, to me, someone's better off having one smart, hard-working, dedicated, passionate person on their team than having, 3 or 4 that are like, just, okay, let me get to this when I can, and, but I got other things that are more important to me. So.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And finally, I'll leave you with this question. This is another question that I'm asking most of the guests on my podcast. And the question is sort of, what are your thoughts on the future of the music business? Obviously, the music business has changed dramatically over the last couple decades. Are you optimistic about the future? Are you pessimistic? A little bit of both? Like, what do you think in general sort of going forward?
Well, I think, first and foremost, there is a lot of great music being made. And, there's no shortage of great music, and there's no shortage of creativity, and there's no shortage of people that are inspiring and people that are inspired. But, I think some people that are, there are people that are going to make music because they're like, hey, this is what I have to do. Whether I become successful or not, I'm writing these songs and I'm going to play these songs, and this is something that I'm just going to do, period. And there's other people that are like, hey, like, I want to be a star. I want to be a pop star. I want to be a rock and roll star. I want to be a hip hop artist that everyone knows. I mean, and that's going to be a slightly different dynamic. Look, obviously, and I'm not going to sit here and profess to be an expert on all things in the music business, but clearly, the streaming model is what is going to be, and I think that, the people that, love vinyl, I know vinyl sales have been, increasing over the last 7 or 8 years, but that's, probably getting close to plateauing. But like I said earlier, to me, the most important thing that any young artist can do is make the best music they can possibly make and then get a fan base. And look, the people that are really smart and that have great social media presence and they can create events online, I mean, that's obviously a great way to start. and on the other hand, I think, getting in your van with your buddies and playing gigs and, playing different markets over and over again, and ideally every time you play, building more and building more, that can create a sustainable long-term career.
Yeah, for sure. How important do you feel like it is? Because it seems like a lot of artists that come to my website and clients that I work with and that I do consulting with, it seems like a lot of them are a little bit older, and something I hear a lot is, I don't want to tour anymore. I tried that. It didn't work. Maybe they're in their 40s or 50s, and they have this idea that they can sit at home, record these great songs, crank out music, and be successful licensing. Do you see that as a viable way to go about licensing music? And I guess what I'm trying to ask you is, do you need to tour and play live in order to be just like super successful with licensing?
No, you don't.
Okay.
I mean, you first and foremost have to, write and create great songs. But if you are, a 40-year-old, guy with a wife and kids, and you've got a home studio and you're writing, really good songs, and you've got a good relationship with someone who's getting them out there. Do I think that someone can make a living doing that? No, I don't. I think the amount of people that can actually have that be their primary source of income would be minuscule. I would be, I'd be surprised if there were, 20 people in the country that can really do that. I mean, unless they already had something before that, unless they were a signed artist, and, or unless they had been, a composer creating original music, for commercials or for trailers. They've already been doing that. But if someone, has been, a school teacher or, has, worked in tech and, and now they're, but they've always been a musician and now they want to, try to start doing this, at 40, or whatever, I think it's going to be a tough road to hoe. I mean, I certainly don't think they can plan on having that be their job. They could plan on having something they love that will, sometimes put some money in their pocket, but I don't think they can plan on having that be, something that, pays their mortgage.
Yeah, it sounds like you really need to be all in. You need to be an artist that tours and writes and, like you said, has a manager and has people working with him. It's a full-time endeavor.
Yeah, I mean, look, there certainly are exceptions to the rule, but there are exceptions because they're exceptions, and it's hard, and no matter what, whether it's a company like ours that's been around for a long time and has licensed 10,000 songs over the years. It's still, we have to dance for our supper every single day. We've got no guarantees about what we do, and it's an impossible thing to predict. I mean, look, I've gotten used to it. I run this business this way, but but when you are running, when you're looking to make money on getting songs licensed, there's nothing precise about it. So you can't sit there and say, hey, I know I'm going to, have 10 licenses, as an individual artist, in 2018, that's going to collectively pay me, $190,000. If someone is planning, then, they're probably going to be disappointed.
Yeah. Do you have any sort of idea on average when you pitch to a project? Is there any are you able to quantify like what the average success ratio is?
Oh. Even in terms of when we're pitching songs, how often does what we pitched become a license?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, it's it would be. Well, I guess look, I'm going to qualify that somewhat. It's one thing if someone sends us out a search and we're responding to that search with songs is one way of pitching. I mean, another way of pitching is we'll just create custom compilations and send them into a music supervisor who works on a particular TV show or works at a trailer house, or works for an advertising agency. That's a different way of pitching. I'm assuming maybe you're meaning the responding to music searches where they're like, hey, I'm working on this and I need, some, mid-tempo rock songs with a female vocal that's about a summer morning. I would say, we probably get like 1 out of 30.
It's not too bad, right? But again, like you said, they're coming to you initially anyways.
Yeah. Now, and again, it varies. There are people that, we get most of our licenses because we just know the music they like, and we send them either entire records or we create custom compilations for them that they download, and then they just keep in their own library, and they know when they're looking for something, they'll go to their Sugaroo section of their hard drive, and they'll pull out some of our stuff, But then there are people that are, sending out searches and asking us for specific stuff for a specific project. And so, a lot of different people have different processes, and it's our job to service people they want to be serviced, and that's what we need to do in order to be successful. So, my creative team all have their clients that they pitch music to, and it's their job to understand how all their clients want to receive music. And so that's, part of what I expect them to do on a daily basis.
Gotcha. Well, listen, thanks so much for doing this. I know we talked about keeping this to around a half hour, and looks like we're at almost 40 minutes. So I'm going to let you go, but I appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today. Before you go, I wanted to tell people where they can learn more about Sugaroo. So your website is Sugaroo, which is SUGAROO.com.
That's correct. And that's probably the best place. Go there, go to our Facebook page, and, we also have on YouTube, there's a Sugaroo placements page that probably lists, 100 or so, recent placements. And, there's lots of opportunities to, for anyone just kicking around. There's not too many other Sugaroos, so we're pretty easy to find.
Cool. And do you encourage artists, or do you welcome artists to submit music via your website? Should they reach out and connect with you?
Yeah, I mean they're welcome to do that, and again, as I said at the top of our chat, we say no to most, and that's for no other reason that we're just trying to work the artists where we work. But yeah, they're welcome to reach out to us, and at the same time they should also look at other companies and research other companies and have a sense of the companies that will make sense for their music as well. Sure,
that makes sense. Well, listen, thanks so much for doing this, and let's keep in touch, and have a great day.
My pleasure, Aaron. Good luck.
Thanks, Michael.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.